Om Gana Chimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. We're going to be speaking from 10th Canto, chapter 23. For those of you in Wellington, New Zealand, you may note we're going to do a little bit from where we left off last weekend. And also, we should take note that we have the disappearance day of three extraordinary devotees to celebrate. Polavecha Sridhar, also known as Sridhar Pandit, and Shamananda, Sri Shamananda, as well as Mukunda Dutt. Mukunda Dutt is a participant in Gaur Leela, associate of Lord Chaitanya. The other two, Polavecha Sridhar is also an associate of Lord Chaitanya, and Shamananda, Sri Shamananda comes after. It's always good for us to beg for the mercy of these devotees, and you can utilize to great effect the Vaishnav calendar for taking note of these extraordinary devotees and asking for their blessings. Advancement in bhakti is not just about our own efforts, although that is important. Advancement in bhakti is also about getting the blessings of superiors. But before discussing, especially Mukunda Dutt, I think, we will go to the Bhagavatam, 10th canto, where we left off last weekend, for those of you who were attending. Where did we leave off? The end of chapter 22. Shukadev Goswami abruptly stops his narration of the cowherd boys wandering in the forest of Vrindavan. And you may recall, we'll give you a brief recap. Krishna's praising the trees, how munificent, how charitable, how giving are the trees, as he's walking with his cowherd boys and the cows through the forest. He sees the trees laden with fruits, flowers, bowing down. And so he's pointing out, just see these trees, they give everything and tolerate everything while giving. This is a hint. Krishna is going to expose the behavior of hard-hearted Smarta Brahmanas dedicated to rituals, the Vedic externals, the flowery words of the Vedas promising elevation to Swarga, the heavenly planets. Krishna is going to expose them by giving mercy to these Brahmanas' wives who are soft-hearted, pure devotees of the Lord. So we explained briefly last weekend how the acharyas point out that Krishna and the cowherd boys and the calves are wandering farther away from their usual areas, far from Vrindavan. They're wandering in the forests of Braj close to Mathura. Krishna's doing this on purpose because that's that area is where the Brahmanas and their wives live, close to Mathura. So Krishna, you could say, is going out of his way to give mercy. After discussing the trees, and we did discuss this extensively last weekend, Aho Esham from Janma, how superior is the birth of these trees. In other words, better to be a tree than a hard hearted Brahmana who has no compassion or care for others, who's simply absorbed in his own selfish, pious activities for his own auspicious gain. These are called, such types are called elevationists. They're just concerned with being elevated to the heavenly planets. Sophisticated materialism. So we briefly discussed about the cowherd boys and the cows drinking from the Yamuna River. Remember, Shukadeva Goswami spends about 7 verses describing this wandering through the forest. Very important. Normally, you wouldn't think that someone's wandering is so significant, but everything in Krishna Lila is so important. We discussed that. How first the cows drank from the Yamuna River because the cowherd boys consider the cows their life and soul. Just like a good government leader considers the needs of the citizens foremost. And we discussed how, even though unlimited cows drank from the Yamuna, when it was time for the cowherd boys to drink, still the water was sweet. Normally, you would think if a herd of animals is drinking from a river, the river becomes sullied and disturbed and loses its sweet flavor. But this is Vrindavan in Krishna Lila. So after the cows drank to relieve their thirst, the cowherd boys drank, and the river was sweet as ever. Shukadeva Goswami stops there. What's happening next? Why does he stop? He stops because he's stunned with ecstasy, describing the Leelas. This is the way Srimad Bhagavatam is. It's literary ecstasy, whether you realize it or not. The cowherd boys are hungry. How did that happen? This is what Shukadeva Goswami, this is where he's going to start after coming out of being stunned. He's stunned just by hearing about the cowherd boys and the cows drinking water and wandering through the forest. This shows you how significant is everything that Krishna does. Everything Krishna does. A devotee wants to focus on, understand, remember. So let's talk about the cowherd boys. Hunger. I don't know if we mentioned last weekend, but by Krishna's arrangement, the cowherd boys did not bring any lunch to the forest when they left home in the morning. Normally, they would bring some rice preparation and yogurt. They didn't do it by Krishna's arrangement because Krishna wanted them to go beg food from the wives of the Brahmanas after failing to get food from the Brahmanas. What about their hunger? Did we explain this last week? The special nature of cowherd boy hunger, gopa hunger. They were feeling hunger simply to get Krishna to eat because they're thinking Krishna must be hungry. So they were not feeling selfish hunger. You could say that their stomachs were rumbling, so to speak, with empathy for Krishna. He should be eating. They're not thinking of themselves. They're not selfish. He should be eating. He's been in the forest all morning. So they call out to Krishna. And we look at the first verse of chapter 23 of the 10th canto. Sri Gopa Uchu, the cowherd boy said. Are you ready for what the cowherd boy said? Rama Rama Mahabaho, Krishna Dushta Nibbana, Eshavai Bhadate Chunas, Touch Chantim Kartum Arhata. O Rama, mighty arm one. O Krishna, chastiser of the wicked. We are being harassed by hunger, and you should do something about it. They're repeating Balaram's name twice. They're appealing to Balaram as Rama, the giver of enjoyment. And they say his name twice to show we're really hungry. Rama, Rama, Mahabaho. Oh, mighty arm Balaram. With your strong arms, Mahabaho, you can do anything. So certainly you can deal with our hunger. Avi Karnapur, in his Ananda Vrindavan Champu, says that the cowherd boys were feeling their stomachs to be like pots of fire burning with hunger. But this is not material. This is all part of the Leela. They want Krishna to eat. They want Krishna to be satisfied. They call out to Balaram first, Rama Rama Mahabaho, because they think Krishna will be most pleased by our respecting his older brother properly. We're experiencing intolerable hunger. You should do something about it. So, calling out to Balaram repeatedly, they call now to Krishna. Krishna Dushta Nibarhana. Oh, Krishna, you with the perfect form. You're the destroyer of the wicked. Just as Balaram is mighty armed, similarly, you're the destroyer of the wicked. Certainly, that means you can destroy our hunger. So please remember, this is all about play. So what's going to happen next? Hearing the boys plea, Krishna is going to speak so that he enacts his plan to please the wives of the Brahmanas, who are his real devotees, unlike their husbands. The acharyas explain that for a long time, these wives had attraction for Krishna, pure attraction for Krishna. Krishna wants to give them his mercy. So all this is happening just by the cowherd boy's hunger, which is happening by the arrangement of Krishna's pastime energy, Lila Shakti. I'm thinking whether to go on with this Leela or talk about Mukunda Dutt and Kolavecha Sridhar now. I think we'll go on a little bit more. Krishna tells the cowherd boys that there is food nearby. There's a sacrificial arena, very erudite, aristocratic brahmanas are there performing a yagya. Yagya means food. Go there. They're thinking, these brahmanas, that they're performing the yagya to go to the heavenly planets. Krishna wants to demonstrate that he doesn't give his mercy to anyone except the bhaktas. And the wives of these brahmanas are the real devotees. The brahmanas know everything about the Vedas except the goal of the Vedas. The brahmanas are austere. They have all kinds of intricate Vedic knowledge of rituals, sacrifices, but they don't have any bhakti. They're chanting the Vedic hymns, but they don't know the goal of the Vedas. So, how does Krishna strategize? He gives the cowherd boys a plan. When you go there to the Yagya arena and see these brahmanas, request some food, but declare your request in the name of my brother Balaram. And then you can mention my name. You can say you've been sent by us. So Krishna's putting himself in a lower position than his older brother Balaram. And there's a reason for that. The material conceptions of these brahmanas would consider that Balaram is the son of a Kshatriya, Vasudeva. Whereas they know Krishna is the son of Vaishya, a cowherd, Nanda Maharaj. So, in the rigid material conception of these brahmanas, they would consider, they would perhaps consider that the request came from Balaram, they might consider. So Krishna gives that strategy to the cowherd boys. As for rice, calling out our names. And by your reciting our names, the acharyas say, by your reciting our names, Krishna and Balaram, you're making kirtan. And in that way, you might wake up these brahmanas from their ignorance by your making kirtan, reciting the names of Krishna and Balaram. If you're feeling a little hesitant to execute this task, begging from the brahmanas, just say you've been sent by Krishna and Balaram. In other words, we'll take the blame. Don't say you've been sent by your parents. Glorify the name of Balaram. He's got great power. You see, the cowherd boys, Sanatan Goswami explains, the cowherd boys might be thinking, well, as devotees, we shouldn't beg for food. But Krishna tells them, but you're sent by Balaram and I. Therefore, there's no fault because you're following our instruction. But the cowherd boys could reply, that may be true about being ordered, but still the followers get some fault. And then Krishna, the Acharya say, tells them, by kirtan, all the faults in the endeavor are destroyed. So he's teaching them how to beg while doing Sankirtan, while chanting the names of Krishna and Balaram. So the boys went to the sacrificial arena, and there's smoke and fire, and there are actually lots of people gathered there, focused on the yajna. So how did the cowherd boys present themselves? They stood before the brahmanas with like that, offering pranams, palms joined together, and then they made full dandavats spread out on the ground. Such a humble attitude. Although they're spread out fully on the ground, laying there, they're more effulgent than these brahmanas. By their humility, they're also revealing the bad conduct of the brahmanas. So you can see them spread out on the ground in full dandavats, fulgent. So they address the brahmanas. This is text 6. Hey Bhumi Deva Srinuta Krishnasya Desha Karinaha Praptan Janita Bhadram Vo Gopan no Rama Choditan. Cowherd boys. Oh, earthly gods, please hear us. We cowherd boys are executing the orders of Krishna, and we've been sent here by Balaram. We wish all good for you. Please acknowledge our arrival. Now, did you notice Krishna told them first mention Balaram because the Brahmanas might pay attention, thinking Balaram is a Kshatriya birth, whereas Krishna is a Vaishya birth, lower birth. But the cowherd boys, they kind of they changed that up a bit. The first thing they said was, "We're executing the orders of Krishna, and we've been sent here by Balaram." So they put Krishna first. They were reasoning, number one, that Krishna is the son of the king of the cowherds, Nanda Maharaj, and therefore Krishna has more power. We'll mention also that Balaram sent us, and we'll give Balaram the rice that we get. But they called out to the Brahmanas, mentioning Krishna's name first, because they're main attractions for Krishna. So they forgot all about the instruction Krishna gave. Better do it in the name of Balaram. They forgot all about that. Mention my name later. They forgot all about that. In other words, they're devoted to both Krishna and Balaram, but more devoted to Krishna. So they describe the situation. Krishna and Balaram are tending their cows not far from here. They're hungry and request you give them some of your food. Therefore, O Brahmanas, O best of the knowers of religion, if you have faith, please give some food to them. The cowherd boys here are being a bit sarcastic. Oh, best of the knowers of religion, because they're sensing these Brahmanas are going to give them nothing. You might say about a person these days, especially in cities, the person has street smarts. Well, the cowherd boys have forest smarts. They can sense, even when they're making the request, they could sense these these Brahmanas are not going to comply. They won't even give an answer, what to speak of not comply. And this really disturbs the cowherd boys, not because they've been rejected, but they can see these Brahmanas don't want to serve Krishna. They don't know the goal of the Vedas. So they're going to go back to Krishna disappointed. We'll continue from there in our next session, whenever that may be. But for now, let us remember Mukunda Dutt. We're celebrating his disappearance today. We're going to go to an astonishing event in Gaur Lila. Lord Chaitanya is at the house of Srivas Thakur and sitting on the altar, revealing his divinity, revealing that he is the supreme personality of Godhead. And he's asking all his devotees as he sits on the altar, come forward, ask whatever benediction you like. This goes on for 21 hours. So Vrindavan Das Thakur describes how various devotees, according to their attachments, requested benedictions for their disciples, their son, their wife, their servant. May those persons become Krishna conscious. Or they would ask for a benediction for themselves. May I develop devotion for my spiritual master. Let my disciple, my wife, etc., be eager to serve you. These were their requests in bhakti. Sitting on the altar, Mahaprabhu, Vishvambara, gave benedictions to everyone. All his associates came forward, but not Mukunda. The scene is that Mukunda, whose disappearance day we're celebrating today, was sitting behind a curtain. He just couldn't present himself before Lord Chaitanya, and he hadn't been called. Now, Mukunda in Krishna Lila is a singer in Braj. There are two singers, especially, who also appeared in Gaur Lila as singers, Mukunda and Vasudev Dutt. There's no doubt that Mukunda is such a great devotee. Whenever he would sing, the event would be indescribable. But he seems to be receiving punishment now in that Lord Chaitanya doesn't call for him. For 21 hours, Lord Chaitanya has been giving benedictions to all his associates. Ask for me what you want. Ask any benediction you want. And of course, because these are pure devotees, they're all asking for benedictions of bhakti upon themselves or their associates or family members. Later, we'll hear, because it's the disappearance day of Kolavecha Sridhar Pandit, we're going to hear that Lord Chaitanya asked for him during this 21-hour inconceivable exposition. But he doesn't ask for Mukunda, whose kirtans, singing, makes everyone melt. The devotees, you would think, might overlook this. No, they all felt distress. Just see their lack of envy and their empathy for other devotees. Why hasn't Mukunda been called? He's so dear to everyone. He's so dear to Lord Chaitanya. Just see Mukunda's humility. He wouldn't come unless he was called. He's just behind a curtain. And just see the devotees care. Shivas says to Lord Chaitanya, "O Lord of the universe, how has Mukunda offended you? He's so dear to you, and he's our life. Tell us, whose heart doesn't melt when Mukunda sings?" He's so attached to devotional service. He's always careful. But it seems you're dishonoring him. If he's actually committed an offense, then punish him. But why neglect him? This point may be a little hard for you to understand. Punishment? Who wants to be punished? But a devotee would rather be punished by the Supreme Personality Godhead than be neglected. The only example I can think of to help you gain some insight into that point of how anything is better than nothing to be neglected. Sometimes I notice amongst the householders, there are arguments and battles just to stir up something. Just so there's some kind of flow of rasa, some kind of flow of something in the relationship rather than zero. Better to poke the other person and create some stir rather than just nothing. Better that there's a fight, argument, than just no exchanges whatsoever. Living entities can't live without tasting the pure rasas of the spiritual world or the perverted rasas of the material world. One devotee was explaining to me why she provokes arguments if things are getting too quiet. She said, I do it in order to make sure he notices me. I do it to make sure I'm still alive. And I do it to make sure the relationship is still intact. Therefore, those are the three reasons to cause a commotion. No one likes to be neglected. Better cause a stir. And that way you feel there's something to your existence, something to talk about, something to exchange. So, my point in explaining this is that a devotee doesn't want to be neglected by the Supreme Personality Godhead. Better to be punished. And that's what Shiva Thakur is pointing out. If he's actually committed an offense, then punish him. You're giving out benedictions, you're giving out blessings. That's reciprocation. If necessary, punish Mukunda. That's also reciprocation. But don't neglect him. Don't let there be nothingness. I hope you can understand the point. The Shivas Thakur continues. He can't come before you unless you call him. So please call him so he can see you. What was Lord Chaitanya's reaction? Don't speak such words again. Don't ever speak to me on that devotee's behalf. Don't ever mention it. Don't ever request me to give him any mercy. This was stated in anger. And then Lord Chaitanya explained why he was responding in that way. Sometimes he takes a straw in his mouth. Mukunda does that. And sometimes he has a stick. Don't you recognize such behavior? Sometimes he presents himself to me with all humility, and sometimes he beats me with a stick. Therefore, this combination, straw and stick holder, can't see me. What's Lord Chaitanya present? Why is he presenting such, a picture of Mukunda, who everyone recognizes as such a dear devotee. Lord Chaitanya accuses him of being in two camps, one foot in each camp. When he's with the bhaktas, he talks about bhakti, pure devotion. But then he goes and hangs out with impersonalists. And those impersonalists are actually beating me with a stick by saying the Supreme Personality of God, it doesn't exist. There's nothing but Brahman. This Mukunda obviously wants to merge into Brahman and give up devotional service. Yet he also sits amongst the Vaishnavas and pretends to be a humble devotee. What could Srivas Thakur say? Except, who is qualified to understand your powers? We, the devotees, the Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, don't see any fault in Mukunda. Surely your lotus feet witness this fact. Lord Chaitanya went on, wherever this person goes, he mingles with impersonalists and speaks like them. Or when he's with Vaishnavas, he mingles and speaks like them. He's two faced, in other words. He's kind of like a synthesizer. He wants to create a synthesis of Bhakti and Mayavad. So obviously, Lord Chaitanya is calling him out on that and accusing Mukunda of beating him with a stick, because this is what Mayavad philosophy does. The Supreme Absolute Truth has no personality, no arms, no legs, no face. So Lord Chaitanya equates that with constantly beating him with a stick. Because Mukunda, when he associates, he says, with Mayavadis, he denies the eternality and supremacy of devotional service. Specifically, Mahaprabhu says, anyone who dares to mention that there's something superior to devotional service constantly beats me with a stick. Mukunda has committed an offense against devotional service, therefore he cannot see me. Mukunda could hear all this. He's behind the curtain. He hears the conclusion. He cannot see me. Mukunda cannot see me. He accepted. Lord Chaitanya knows that I took some advice, apparently, from some Mayavad guru, in that way indicating I didn't accept the supremacy of devotional service. So I'm an offender. This is Mukunda trying to take on board the criticism that Mahaprabhu is making. He's not saying, "Oh, I'm innocent. Nothing you say is true. Why are you treating me like this?" He's taking it all on board. It must be true. What was Mukunda's conclusion then? There's no need for me to continue my life. Lord Chaitanya refuses to see me. Today, this offensive body that I have, I'm going to give it up, because I don't know when I'll ever see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again. Very severe moment. But Mukunda makes one request to Srivas Thakur. Ask Lord Chaitanya when I will be able to see him. He says, I can't see him, and I'm about to give up my life. But please ask him when I might be able to see him. Is there a possibility? And he breaks down crying in distress. So Srivas Thakur presents the question to Lord Chaitanya. And what was Lord Chaitanya's answer? He will certainly get my darshan again after millions of births. Millions of births. What was Mukunda's reaction? He heard it and he began to dance in ecstasy. I will attain him. I will attain him. After millions of births, I will attain him. He's overwhelmed with ecstasy, dancing, jubilant. Noting this, Lord Chaitanya smiled and ordered, bring Mukunda at once. All the Vaishnavas called out, come on, Mukunda, you can come now. The Lord wants to see you. But what's Mukunda doing? He's lost in ecstasy, dancing. I will see him after millions of births. I will see him after millions of births. They're telling, come on, you can see him now. He's just lost. Mukunda's just, he's gone in ecstasy. Millions of births. I'll see him. I'll see him again. What do you think of that? Lord Chaitanya finally is able to rouse Mukunda out of his ecstasy and says, you're freed from your offenses. Come see me and take my mercy. So all the devotees brought Mukunda, who pays his full dandavats. And Mahaprabhu tells him, get up, get up. Actually, you don't even have a fraction of an offense. Any apparent faults due to your bad association are vanquished. I have been defeated by you. So what does this show? Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out. Here is the demonstration that Krishna is controlled by love. A devotee can show so much love for Krishna that he can even change the will of Krishna. In other words, Mahaprabhu is telling Mukunda, my extraordinary power has been defeated by your loving service. Due to your intense eagerness for devotional service, you have surpassed the millions of years in which you were supposedly not to see me. Due to your intense eagerness, you surpassed that time, millions of years, in one moment. My potency has been defeated by your potency. Sometimes we think, I'm trying so hard in service, I'm trying to be Krishna conscious. Does Krishna notice me? Does Krishna care? But in this Leela with Mukunda, you're seeing the peak potential of bhakti, in which Lord Chaitanya is saying, you had such confidence in my words that my words are infallible. After millions of births, you'd see me again. In this way, you've captured me in your heart forever, eternally. You believed with firm conviction that you will attain devotional service after millions of births. You put such faith in my words. Actually, I can never be averse to you. Remember, Ababu tells Mukunda, you've captured me in your heart eternally. I said you would achieve me after millions of births, but you've become freed from those millions of births in one moment due to the intensity of your longing, the intensity of your attachment for devotional service. You're my singer, Mahaprabhu told him. I always reside with you. I was just joking with you, actually. When I said you would see me after millions of births, you should know this was simply a joke. Because you're so dear to me, it's my nature to joke with you. Even if you committed millions of offenses, they wouldn't be considered offenses because you're so dear to me. You're my servant, and your body is filled with devotional service. I constantly reside on your tongue. And Mukunda sings, Mahaprabhu is on his tongue constantly. Mukunda just cried and cried and cried, hearing Mahaprabhu's words. He didn't think that he was innocent. He didn't try to present himself as innocent. He condemned himself. We could go on with Mukunda's response, but we wanted to discuss Kolavecha Sridhar. The name Kolavecha Sridhar means bark seller. Kolavecha Sridhar was one of the 12 main gopas in Krishna Lila. He was particularly the personality named Kusumasab. Now, his situation is very interesting. He was so poor in Gaur Lila in terms of material wealth. He was so poverty stricken. So, why, if he's a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, why is he so poor? Sometimes Krishna wants to show that material prosperity and wealth has zero to do with bhakti. You have to understand this Leela with maturity. It's not that Krishna is saying to be a devotee, you have to be starving and penniless, but he wants to show that bhakti is possible. The height of bhakti is possible in any circumstance. Rich, like Ambarish Maharaj, or poverty stricken, like Ulabecha Sridhar. But there's a catch, and we'll hear about it in terms of Kolavecha Sridhar actually being the most wealthy personality. So through Kolavecha Sridhar, also known as Sridhar Pandit, Lord Chaitanya is teaching a lesson to his associates about the real wealth, bhakti. So one day, Lord Chaitanya goes to Kolavecha Sridhar's house. The house was a shack. Those of you who have been to Mayapur and remember going to the spot where Kolavecha Sridhar's house was. And his house at the time Gaur Leela was manifest was total shack. He wore rags. He tried to eke out a living by selling bark from banana trees, making the bark into plates and cups. And also the banana trees had some edible parts besides the bananas. Kolovech's, was so poor he wasn't dealing with the bananas themselves, but just parts of the stems of and stalks of banana plants. So Lord Chaitanya went there and asked him, "Why are you so poor?" We look around and see the worshippers of Durga Devi, the worshippers of the demigods, seem so prosperous. And here you are, such a dedicated devotee of the Supreme Personality of God, and you're so poor. What was Sridhar Pandit's answer? Birds make their nest in the trees, and they wander from place to place to find food. In this way, their whole day is passed. This is the same as a king in a palace enjoying the best objects of gratification. There's no difference in the flavor of pleasure tasted by the king in his palace with his royal opulence or the bird flying from tree to tree searching for food. The flavor is the same. And you get that. This point is explained by Prahlad Maharaj in the seventh canto. Sukam Indriyakam Daitya Deha Dehina Yogina. The flavor of material gratification is the same in any species of life. So this is Sridhar Pandit's answer. You talk about wealth, you talk about prosperity, poverty, but whether you're a bird flying from tree to tree looking for food or a king enjoying his senses in the palace, the flavor is the same. And you understand that? Or I know it sounds so counterintuitive, but we need to think about it. What was Lord Chaitanya's response? Externally, you appear to be poor, but you are actually the world's richest man. I'm going to shortly reveal this to the entire foolish world. So Sridhar Pandit would have a stand or some kind of setup for selling his wares. And everyone in Navadvip knew that his price was completely fair. There's no point in bargaining, there's no point in haggling, as is done to this day in the marketplaces in India. Everyone knew he's such an honest man. The price he gives is a fair and honest price. But Nimai Pandit, Mahaprabhu would come every day and haggle with Kolavecha Sridhar. Your price is too high. Why don't you just give me these things, these articles from banana trees? Give it to me. They would even have a tug of war. Nimai Pandit would scoop up the various banana plant items and got to walk away with them. And Kolavecha Sridhar would embrace him. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. But Kolavecha Sridhar would always become overwhelmed by the beauty of Mahaprabhu's form. This went on day after day after day. Lord Chaitanya would not pay the fair price. Sometimes Mahaprabhu would pay half the fair price and just scoop everything up and walk away. Finally, Lord Chaitanya accepted Polavecha Sridhar's proposal. Look, every day I'll just give you some items. Okay. You can take them and for free. So at the same Mahaprakash revelation, when Lord Chaitanya at the home of Srivas Thakur sat on the altar and revealed his divinity, fulfilling all the desires of his devotees. Remember, we said he called for all the devotees and revealed to them the way they wanted reciprocation from the Supreme Personality Godhead, but he didn't call Mukunda. Well, he did call Sridhar Pandit, and he said, just like he said to all the others, ask for me any benediction. In fact, I want to give you the 8 mystic perfections, the Ashtasiddhi. Do you know what the Ashtasiddhi perfections are? You would then understand that who can refuse that? And what was Sridhar Pandit's response? Because Vishwambar, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was repeatedly urging, you've got to ask for a benediction. You've got to ask for a boon. Take mystic powers. You can be a king. What do you want? What was Sridhar Pandit's famous response? My Lord, if you must give me something, then this is what I ask for. I want that Brahmana, that Nimai Pandit, who used to steal my banana leaves and bark, let him be my Lord birth after birth. Let that Nimai Pandit, who used to argue with me, let him be my master and allow me to serve his lotus feet. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur has some commentary for us to focus on. He says, through empirical knowledge or external analysis, no one can recognize the true character of a devotee. He goes on to explain that it's not that a devotee who it's not automatic that a devotee who has the ability to collect lots of money or has so many followers or a great religious scholar, that doesn't mean that they are internally attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Doesn't mean that they're a better Vaishnav. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur goes on to say that a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu might have very little money, may know may show no signs of having a great number of followers, and may have no talent for argument or debate. But that person can be a great devotee. And those with mundane vision will never understand this because they have no possibility by their externalism, by their material vision. They have no possibility to understand who is actually a devotee. So the whole issue is about who is capable of recognizing a devotee. It takes a devotee to recognize a devotee because sometimes by Krishna's arrangement, the greatest devotees are in apparently the greatest the most difficult material situations just to teach us a lesson. Just like in the case of Kolovich Sridhar, you might see simply his poverty, seller of banana tree products. Not the bananas, remember, just stems and leaves and nothing. It's so so poor he was. Yet he would only keep half of his next to nothing income. He would spend the other half on the worship of the Ganga. And when Mahaprabhu would come and take all his articles and not pay a fair price, Mahaprabhu would say, "Why are you worshiping the Ganga? Why are you giving me what? Why are you giving all those articles, those items, so you can worship Ganga? I am the father of the Ganga." In that way, Mahaprabhu was giving hints to Sridhar Pandit about his divinity. That was before the revelation at the house of Srivas Thakur, when Lord Chaitanya sat on the altar of Srivas Thakur and fulfilled all the desires of the devotees. This is a very important point to remember. Remember that Lord Chaitanya told Sridhar Pandit, "I'm going to demonstrate what real wealth is." In other words, you present yourself as being totally poverty stricken, but I know you're the wealthiest person in the universe. I'm going to show that. Oh, wealthy with what? When Lord Chaitanya was revealing his divinity at the house of Srivas Thakur, sitting on the altar, calling for this devotee, that devotee, he called for Sridhar Pandit, and the devotees went to fetch him. And they could hear him chanting from far off. He used to chant very loudly in his shack, and the neighbors, many of them hated it. They thought they thought he's just crying out because of hunger. He keeps us up at night just yelling like that because he's hungry. They couldn't understand what is ecstatic love of Krishna. So today is the disappearance day of Kolaveja Sridhar Pandit. We talked about Mukunda Dutt. It's his disappearance day we're celebrating. And also Shamananda. Shamananda is part of that extraordinary trio of Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivas Acharya, and Shamananda. We beg for their blessings upon our lowly self